A newly released report on race-based data in policing has the city's top cop apologizing. Toronto's interim police chief, James Raymer, apologized to the city's racialized community earlier today. The statistics show Black and Indigenous people faced a disproportionate amount of enforcement and use of force in 2020 compared to white people. Raymer admitted not enough has been done to ensure fair and unbiased treatment.
On behalf of my command, as the leaders of this organization, we take full responsibility. We have often heard from communities that apologies alone are not sufficient, and we agree. It is also our responsibility to identify the systems and procedures that are causing or contributing to the disparate treatment of racialized people and to address it head on. We will do all we can to fix this. And some of this important work is already underway.
Meanwhile, the president of the Toronto Police Association suggests the findings don't paint a complete picture.
We have no context for this data. We have no idea what the situation was, which involved the officers having to resort to use of force. I can tell you that our officers, some of the best trained in North America, have to keep in mind, they have particular policies, guidelines, strategies. They're directed by the service on what they need to do and what their job is.
Okay, for reaction now, let's go live to Dexter Voisin. He is a dean and professor with the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today. So this is a lot for people in racialized communities, the Black and Indigenous communities, to take in today. I want to start by asking your reaction, not only as a member of one of these communities, but as someone who studies social sciences in this city.
Yes, well, I'm actually dean and professor at Case Western Reserve University. So this data is shocking, and in fact, it's quite damning. And the fact that this data was just collected just a few years ago, and the absence of systematic data, racial data on policing in Toronto is astounding. The report shows that Black individuals in particular were almost 5 times more likely to be arrested. This is really very painful. When you think about comparative data in the United States and in a city like New York City, those rates are like 3.5 times. So the level of policing, the level of racial discrimination in Toronto, which is one of the most progressive cities in Canada, it's totally damning and extremely shocking and disturbing.
Dean, would you use the word shocking? I mean, I know you've used it twice, but this is what we've heard from those in the community for years. And what we've heard today aligns with past external reports that have found, once again, Black people are overrepresented in police use of force in the city. I mean, I imagine hearing it from the police, too, can contribute to a level of shock, but it's got to be frustrating to when the community says this has always existed, and now the police is saying after years, the police force is saying, yes, it actually has.
Well, it actually has, and, communities have been making this outcry for decades. But, this is data that has been hidden in plain sight. Just look at who's in the prison systems in Toronto is predominantly Black and Indigenous individuals. And we know from research that Black and Indigenous individuals do not commit crime at any higher rates relative to their white peers. But look at who ends up in the jail and in the prison system. So this data has been hidden in plain sight for decades, and community members and activists have been drawing attention to it for decades. The Toronto police just started collecting this data in 2019, and I'm sure a lot of this came about because of activism, increased pressure because of high-profile cases like Mr. George Floyd and others. But, we need to think about actionable steps to address this and also focus on the issue of transparency moving forward.
Do you, Professor Dean, as well, accept this apology? We heard from a well-known community member who said at the news conference, no, we don't accept this apology.
Well, words are pretty empty when it comes to situations like this. And we're not just talking about statistics, but we are talking about real lives. So think about the disproportionate impact in terms of the trauma to Black communities, Indigenous communities, higher rates of arrests, what that means in terms of employability and discrimination in the workforce, what it means for children growing up in those families with parents who have arrest records. It's more than just statistics. These are changing the future direction of children and families for decades. So we need to move beyond apologies and talk about actionable steps, smart community policing, having individuals who are from communities employed as community members. Think about more diversity within the police force, training on implicit bias as well as explicit bias. Keep in mind that a lot of these arrests are not just related to unconscious bias, but there are individuals in society who hold negative stereotypes consistently around Black and other racialized groups. And those individuals need to be tracked as well as disciplined. So we have to look at all the measures across the board that move beyond mere apologies.
Okay, thank you so much. Dexter Voisin, want to correct your title here, a dean and professor at Case Western Reserve University and author of America the Beautiful and Violent Black Youth and Neighborhood Trauma in Chicago. We apologize for that error. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me.